Clara Jenkins was the kind of woman most people passed by without noticing. She lived a quiet life in a small Oklahoma town, where the highway stretched past her diner like a silver ribbon cutting through fields of dust. She wasn't famous or rich. Her world revolved around coffee cups, breakfast orders, and long days behind the counter at Denny's diner. But even people with small lives carry big dreams. And Clara's dream was bright red with a chrome grille, a 1965 Ford Mustang. When she was a child, her father used to take her to weekend car shows. He'd lift her onto his shoulders and she'd stare wide-eyed at rows of shiny engines and rumbling classics. Her father's favorite had always been the Mustang. "Listen to that sound, sweetheart," he'd tell her as one roared past. That's the sound of freedom. Those words stuck in her head long after he passed away. Every time she heard an engine hum, she thought of him smiling beside a car he could never afford. Years passed. Life wasn't kind to Clara. Her mother grew ill, bills piled up, and the little savings she had vanished faster than she earned them. Still, she kept a tiny envelope hidden in her kitchen drawer labeled Dream Car. Each payday, no matter how hard life got, she'd slip in $10 or $20. It wasn't much, but it was hope. One cold Saturday morning, as she rode her old bicycle down a rural road toward the farmer's market, something caught her eye. There, beside a weathered barn, sat a red Mustang, faded, dusty, and tired, but unmistakably beautiful. A sign in the window read, "For sale, call Frank." Her heart jumped. She stopped her bike, stared at the car, and felt something deep inside, like seeing an old friend after many years. The paint was dull, the tires flat, and vines curled around the bumper, but to Clara, it was still a piece of magic. She scribbled the number from the sign and hurried home. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number on her old flip phone. After a few rings, a rough but kind voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi, sir," Clara said nervously. "I'm calling about the Mustang you're selling." There was silence for a moment. Then the man chuckled softly. "Didn't think anyone would be calling about that old thing. You sound young. You sure you want a pile of rust like that?" Clara smiled. "I don't care if it's rusty, sir. I've wanted one since I was little." He paused again. "Well, what's your offer?" Clara bit her lip. "I only have $600 saved." "I know that's not much, but I promise I'll take care of it." The man laughed again, not mockingly but warmly. "600, huh? Tell you what, come on by. Let's talk." When Clara arrived that afternoon, she found the old man waiting outside the barn. He was tall, gray-haired, with kind blue eyes and a cane leaning against the hood of the Mustang. "Name's Frank Dorsey," he said, shaking her hand. "You must be the dreamer who called." Clara blushed. "I guess so, sir." He led her around the car. The engine was silent, the seats torn, and dust coated every inch, but Clara didn't see a wreck. She saw potential. She ran her hand over the hood gently, like touching something sacred. "This car," Frank said, his voice quieter now, "belonged to my late wife, Margaret. We bought it in '65 when we were newlyweds. She used to drive it everywhere, to work, to picnics, even to the hospital when our son was born. After she passed, I couldn't bear to drive it again. It just sat here." Clara looked up at him, her heart softening. "I'm sorry for your loss," he nodded slowly. "It's been 15 years. I was planning to sell it to a collector once, but no one ever came. Maybe that's for the best." "Sir," Clara said, her voice shaking slightly, "I can't offer more money, but I'll restore it. I'll bring it back to life." Frank studied her face for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You remind me of her. She had the same spark in her eyes." "All right, Miss Jenkins. 600 and it's yours," Clara gasped. "Really?" He chuckled. "Really? Just promise me one thing. Don't let it rot again." Tears filled her eyes as she handed him the money. "I promise, sir." Frank helped her push the Mustang out into the sunlight. The engine coughed when she tried to start it, but with a bit of luck and a lot of determination, it roared to life for the first time in years. The sound made the birds scatter and made Frank smile wider than he had in a long time. As she drove away, Frank stood by the mailbox, waving. The old barn door swung shut behind him, and he whispered, "Take care of her, both of you." The drive home was short, but for Clara it felt like flying. She parked the car behind her small rented house and spent hours just staring at it. The red paint looked more like rust, the chrome dulled, but she didn't care. She saw what it could be. Over the next months, Clara worked tirelessly. After her long diner shifts, she'd come home, change into overalls, and spend hours under the hood with grease-stained fingers. She didn't know much about engines, but she learned through videos and online forums. A kind neighbor named Joe, a retired mechanic, noticed her struggling one evening and offered to help. "You're brave, tackling this old beast alone," he said, tightening a bolt for her. Clara smiled wearily. "It's my dream car." "Well," Joe said, grinning, "dreams need a little oil and elbow grease too." Every payday she'd buy a small part, a new carburetor, chrome rims, seat covers. On weekends she'd sand the body and repaint the panels by hand. She often thought of her father as she worked, remembering his laughter at the car shows. Sometimes she whispered, "You'd be proud, Dad." Winter passed and spring came. By April the Mustang shone once more, bright cherry red with polished chrome and a smooth purr when she turned the key. When she drove down Main Street, kids waved and people turned to look. For the first time in years, Clara felt alive. One morning, after finishing the late-night shift at the diner, she walked outside to find a note on her windshield. It was written in neat cursive. "Miss Jenkins, I'd love to see the car again. Frank D." She smiled. Of course, he'd want to see it. After all, it had been part of his life for decades. She called him the next day, and he answered on the first ring. "Mr. Dorsey? It's Clara. You left a note." "Ah, yes," he said warmly. "Would it be all right if I came by this weekend? I just want to see her one last time." "One last time?" Clara repeated softly, unsure what he meant. "I'm moving out of state soon," he said, settling near my daughter. "Thought I'd say goodbye before I go." Clara's chest tightened. "Of course. You can come any time." That Saturday she washed the car until it gleamed like new. She even placed a small vase with daisies, Margaret's favorite flower, on the dashboard, something she remembered from Frank's stories. When he arrived, Kane tapping the ground, his eyes widened in disbelief. "My word," he whispered. "You did it," Clara smiled proudly. "She runs beautifully now. Want to hear her?" He nodded. She turned the key and the Mustang came alive with a deep rumble that echoed across the yard. Frank's eyes glistened as he listened. "That sound," he said softly, "that's her heartbeat." They spent the afternoon talking. Frank told her stories about his wife, their road trips, their arguments about who drove faster, their wedding photo taken beside the car. Clara listened fascinated. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a love story on wheels. As the sun began to set, Frank stood up slowly. "Clara," he said, "I've got something for you. But it's better if I bring it next week." "You don't have to, sir," she said quickly. "You've already given me enough," he smiled gently. "Oh, I think you'll want to see this. It's something important." She nodded, curious, not realizing that his next visit would change her life forever. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept wondering what Frank meant. Was it an old photo? A part of the car's history? Maybe a letter from his late wife? She had no idea. But deep down she felt something was coming, something big. Clara spent the week thinking about Frank's words. Every time she wiped the Mustang's hood, she wondered what surprise he meant. She told herself it was probably something small, maybe an old photo of his wife with the car or the original purchase papers. But a small voice inside whispered that it felt bigger than that. The following Saturday morning was warm and bright. Birds chirped outside her window and sunlight spilled through her curtains. Clara had just finished her shift at the diner and was still wearing her apron when she heard a gentle knock on the door. When she opened it, there stood Frank Dorsey, dressed neatly in a brown jacket and holding a thick envelope under his arm. He smiled, though he looked more tired than before. "Morning, Miss Jenkins," he said kindly. "Hope I'm not too early." "Not at all, sir," Clara said, smiling. "I just made coffee. Would you like some?" "I'd appreciate that," he said, stepping inside. They sat at her small kitchen table, the air filled with the smell of coffee and engine grease. Outside, the Mustang gleamed in the driveway, its red paint shining like fire under the sun. Frank looked at it through the window, silent for a while. "You did more than fix a car," he finally said. "You brought back something I thought I'd lost forever." Clara smiled softly. "It's your car, sir. I only helped it breathe again." He turned toward her. "That's the thing, Clara. It's not mine anymore, it's yours. And that's why I came today. I need to give you something that belongs with that car." He opened the envelope slowly and slid a folded document across the table. Clara looked down and froze. It was the original title for the Mustang, and underneath it a second paper freshly signed, transferring full ownership to her name. Her hands shook. "Mr. Dorsey, I already paid you." He raised a hand gently. "That $600 you gave me was a gift, not a price. I took it because I wanted you to feel you earned it. But the truth is, that car was never about money. It was about meaning." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do this, sir." He smiled faintly. "I do. My wife loved that car. She always said she wanted it to go to someone who'd love it like she did. When I met you, I knew right away she'd have liked you. You have that same light in you." Clara couldn't speak for a moment. She felt her throat tighten as she clutched the papers to her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep driving it," he said. "That's all I want," she nodded quickly. "I promise." They walked outside together, the breeze carrying the smell of fresh-cut grass. Frank ran his hand along the Mustang's smooth fender. "Feels like the first day we bought her," he murmured. Margaret picked the color, said it looked like a summer sunset. Clara smiled. "It's a beautiful color." He turned to her again, more serious now. "Clara, there's one more thing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small square box. "I want you to open it." Inside lay a pair of silver keys attached to a small tag engraved with, "For the road ahead. Love, Margaret." Clara blinked in surprise. "She wrote this?" Frank nodded. "Before she passed, she told me to give these keys to someone who'd remind me that life still moves forward. I didn't think I'd ever find that person until you showed up." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks. She didn't know what touched her more, the gesture, the trust, or the sense that somehow, through this car, two strangers had become family. They sat together in silence for a long while, listening to the Mustang's quiet ticking as the metal warmed in the sun. Eventually, Frank cleared his throat. "I have to head out soon. My daughter's expecting me." Clara tried to smile. "Will you visit again?" "I will," he promised. "But even if I don't, remember this. The best engines run because someone believes they still can." He chuckled softly, then turned serious again. "And so do people." That evening, after he left, Clara couldn't stop thinking about his words. She placed the silver keys on her nightstand and stared at them until she fell asleep. The next few weeks passed quietly. Clara kept driving the Mustang to work, each trip feeling like a small victory. People in town began to recognize the car. Some customers would stop by the diner just to see it parked outside. One day, a man in a suit offered to buy it for $15,000, but Clara shook her head. "Not for sale," she said simply. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about memory, love, and a promise. One rainy afternoon, while wiping tables at work, she saw a newspaper on the counter. On the front page was an obituary. Frank Dorsey, retired engineer, age 78. Clara froze. The letters blurred as her eyes filled with tears. The small article said he passed peacefully in his sleep at his daughter's home. She read it twice, barely breathing. After her shift, she drove straight home through the drizzle, parked the Mustang in her yard, and sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I'll keep your promise." That night, lightning flashed across the sky, but she stayed in the car for hours, listening to the rain on the roof, thinking about how strange and kind life could be. Days later, a large envelope arrived in the mail with no return address. Inside was a letter written in Frank's shaky handwriting and another envelope marked, "For Clara." The letter began, "Dear Clara, if you're reading this, it means I've already gone home to Margaret. Don't be sad. I lived a full life, and meeting you was one of its bright moments. You gave an old man peace. You showed me my wife's car could live again, and with it so could I. That's something no money could ever buy. Inside the smaller envelope, you'll find a set of documents. They're not just papers. They're my final gift to you. Take care of the Mustang and keep driving with your heart. Because somewhere out there, someone like you will see that red car and remember that dreams, even small ones, are worth fighting for. With respect and gratitude, Frank Dorsey." Clara wiped her eyes and opened the second envelope. Inside were several folded papers and a small handwritten note. "Look under the passenger seat." Confused, she grabbed her jacket, ran outside, and opened the car door. Sliding her hand beneath the seat, her fingers brushed against a metal tin taped to the frame. Inside the tin was a check, and when she unfolded it, her breath caught. It was written in her name, signed by Frank Dorsey, for $50,000. She sat there frozen, staring at the numbers. For a moment she thought it had to be a mistake. But below his signature were the words, "For your dream, a account from both of us." Tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just about the money. It was what it meant, that he believed in her future. That night she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every moment she'd spent with Frank. His gentle laugh, his stories about Margaret, his quiet pride watching her drive the car. She realized the gift wasn't just the check. It was the message behind it. Never stop believing that kindness still matters. Clara decided not to cash it right away. She put it in a small frame beside the photo of her father and the silver keys. For weeks she kept going to work, driving her Mustang like always, until one day she made a decision. She quit her job at the diner and used part of the money to rent a small workshop in town. On the sign above the door she painted Maggie's Garage and Restorations with Heart. At first it was just her, a few tools, and the Mustang parked out front. But word spread fast. People came not only to fix their cars but also to share stories. Stories about love, about loss, about holding on to dreams. Clara listened to them all. She kept a jar on the counter labeled Frank's Fund. Every time she restored a car, she put a small part of her earnings in that jar. Her goal wasn't to get rich. It was to someday help someone else the way Frank helped her. Years passed. The garage grew. She hired 2 young apprentices, taught them not just about engines but about patience and pride. On the wall hung photos. One of her father at a car show, one of Frank and Margaret with the Mustang, and one of Clara herself smiling behind the wheel. Every year, on the day she first bought the car, she'd drive out to the countryside and park near that same old barn. The structure had collapsed long ago, but the field was still open, filled with wildflowers. She'd sit on the hood, drink a cup of coffee, and whisper, "She still runs, Frank." The red Mustang became a symbol in town. People said it brought luck to anyone who saw it on the road. Children would wave, and older folks would smile knowingly. Clara never remarried, but she was never lonely either. She had her garage, her friends, and her memories, all tied together by a car bought for $600 and a man who believed in her heart. One summer evening, many years later, she got a letter from Frank's daughter. It read, "My father always said the day you called him about that Mustang was the day his heart started beating again. Thank you for giving him peace." Clara folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the silver keys. She walked outside, the setting sun painting the sky the same deep red as her Mustang. She started the engine, listening to its steady rumble. As she drove down the quiet road, the wind in her hair and the fading sun at her back, she smiled. The car wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a story, one built from kindness, memory, and faith. And somewhere she believed an old man and his wife were smiling too, watching her drive into the light, keeping their promise alive.